This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so I will start. Okay, so this is what this is, Gift Aid and GASDS webinar, what you can and can't claim on. So I thought I'd start actually just with a very brief overview about what Gift Aid is and what GASDS are. So in essence, Gift Aid is a government returning to the church or charity the taxes a donor has already paid. So when you receive the donation, they've already paid tax on it. So you're receiving like the net donation. Gift Aid is when the government return the tax that the donor's already paid back to you. And more specifically, it's only income tax or capital gains tax. There used to be a wonderful line on the declarations a few years ago where it said it doesn't include council tax, it doesn't include VAT, it doesn't include car road tax. It is just capital gains and income tax. In order to claim it, you have to be a church or charity recognised by the HMRC. If you're Church of England, then you're what's called an accepted charity. If you're not registered with the Charity Commission, that's perfectly fine. The donor needs to give you permission to be able to claim that money back. That's through a declaration. So they declare that you can claim the donations back. And importantly, you need to keep proper records and audit trails linking the donor to the donation and their permission for gift aid to be reclaimed. If you don't do that, if you have invalid declarations, or if you don't maintain a clear auditable record of declarations linking donations to donors to declarations, if you haven't got the correct details on the declaration, then the declaration could be deemed as invalid. And in which circumstances, HMRC will normally say to you, okay, if you want to contact the donor and validate it, you can do. If you try that and can't do it, then what the HMRC might well then say is, well, if it's an invalid declaration, you're liable to pay the money back to the HMRC. The biggest problem, though, is that they might include interest and penalties. If they include penalties, that means you can't claim GASDS for 2 years, which means potentially you could lose out on £4,000. So the penalty itself might only be £100, but having a penalty, you can't claim GASDS for 2 years, and then you can potentially miss out on £4,000. So making sure the declarations and the information on there is correct is important, and maintaining a clear audit trail. How much can you claim? Well, at the moment, basic tax is 20%. Next April, it will change to 19%. So just a warning for everyone there, the amount of gift aid you'll be able to claim from next April onwards will be dropping to 19% in there. So you'll see a drop in the amount you get. But how's it calculated? Because at the moment it's 20%, but you'll often see that for every £1 donated, add 25p for gift aid. And that can create confusion. People think, oh, gift aid is 25%. Well, no, the basic rate is 20%. So how can you claim 20% of gift aid and receive 25p in the pound? Essentially, this is how it's worked out. Let's say you earned gross from your salary £125. 20% of that is tax. That goes off to the HMRC. So £125 minus £25 leaves you with £100. Let's say you donate that full £100 to a charity and also gift aid it. The HMRC will then give back the £25. So you can see where it's come from the gross amount, 20% taken off the gross amount gives you £25. And that's where you get that mix of it's 20%, but you're actually claiming 25p in the pound, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's move on to what can you claim gift aid on? Essentially, the fundamental principle of gift aid that a donor can only donate their own money that they can then claim gift aid on. So whether that's received by cash, cheque, standing order, direct debit, credit debit card, whether it's a tap by a phone, by a watch, it doesn't matter. It has to be a donation of their own money. That's the only money that they can gift aid, because That's what they're to pay tax on. There are special rules. That means you can also claim on sponsored events. We'll be looking at that later. Charity membership fees, that can be a bit tricky, but we'll have a look at that later. Charity events and auctions, if they're done properly, in circumstances, you can claim gift aid on those. Volunteers, expenses donated back to the charity. Again, we'll be covering that later. Funds raised through charities involved in running a school, that might not be appropriate, but there's extra information on it. Selling goods on behalf of individuals, that's done through a charity shop. So if you see like the Sue Ryder shop and you can sign a gift aid declaration on that, there's a particular method of how that's done. And for information on all those special rules, there's a link there that you can see. If you're interested in selling goods through a charity shop, for example, it gives you all the methodology down there, how it's done. What you can't claim gift aid on, and unfortunately, there's a longer list of what you can't claim than you can claim. So you can't claim on donations from limited companies. Data Developments is a limited company. When we donate gross, and actually the company gets the tax back, which is why you can't claim it. Donate money that are payments for goods or services. It's not a donation. They're paying for something. So if you charge, for example, for tea and coffee at the end of the service, and it's £1 for a cup of tea, you can't claim gift aid on it, you can't claim GADS on it, because they're actually paying for that tea or coffee. If you said, there's tea and coffee, it's freely available, you don't have to pay for it. If you'd like to make a donation, here's a pot to make a donation in. But if you don't want to, you get the tea and coffee anyway. That then potentially could be claimed as GADS in there, because it's a free will. The donor doesn't have to spend the money on the drink. They get to decide whether it's a free donation, free will donation. Whether the donor receives a benefit, and there's all sorts of rules about benefits in there, which will take quite a while to go through. I'll come back to that later, how, if you're interested in that, how you get more information on it. Admissions to events such as jumble sales or concerts, again, they're paying to go into those events. It's not a donation, it's a pay to attend. And we'll be covering that later on with the concert section. Payment for raffle or lottery tickets, again, it's a payment, it's not a donation. Money that started off as a loan, but no longer needs to be paid. Now, there's an additional bit to that. Now, a donor can't just say, or you can't go to donor and say, well, the donor says, you don't need to pay, treat it as gift aid. That's not how it works. But you can, if it's done properly, you can turn it into a donation, which is then gift aid. And we'll cover that part. It's quite precise things you have to do, or you just have to get the right paperwork in place. Donations that must be repaid. If a donor donates and you've got to pay it back, it's not a free will donation. It's not for you to use, so you can't claim gift aid on it. Payment of school fees for a specific person. A donation to a school, potentially, but if it's payment of school fees for a specific person, you can't claim gift aid on that. Donations made through payroll, simply because those donations are made before tax is deducted. So a bit like donation from a limited company, you can't claim gift aid on those because no tax has been paid on it. Similarly, just to really cover that off, where the donation has been deducted from income before tax has been paid. So payroll is the most obvious, but if there are any other situations, they can't be either. A donation of shares can be, and anything from charity cards or vouchers, such as CAF vouchers, because it's claimed in the account for CAF. So again, those are all given gross. You can't claim back on those. And membership fees to community and just social sports clubs, because again, they're receiving a service for it. It's not a donation. And then just to cover off everything else, any donation before you recognise as a charity or community amateur sports club, that wouldn't apply to Church of England churches, but if you're setting up another charity, just to cover those as well. So I mentioned sponsorships, events, you can claim gift aid if it's done, if the form is done correctly. You can essentially turn the sponsorship form into a multiple gift aid declaration, and then gift aid can be claimed on it. But what's important to notice is the money that's raised. So I will quite often do cycling sportives. So I've done 100-mile cycling sportives for charity. Ride London was one of them. Now, when I raised the money, when I collected the money, that money doesn't belong to me. It was actually given by all the other people. They were the ones that paid the gift aid, the tax on it. So although I've collected it, that money doesn't belong to me. So I can't give that total sum to the church and say, I'm going to gift aid it, because all that money didn't belong to me, it belonged to the individual donors. So the person that's been sponsored, the one that's collected it, can't gift aid all that money. As I said, you can design a form for it. So one suggested format, which is I've put down the HMRC, what the HMRC have said, is essentially have a sponsorship form, and where you normally have the declaration on a one-off envelope, put that at the top of the form. You need to ask for the sponsor's full name. You need to ask for their home address. Now that can be minimum of house name, number and postcode. It doesn't need street or town, just house name, number and postcode. The amount they pledged, the amount that's being collected, and the date it was collected. So you see, it's not a lot. It's not a great deal of additional information you need to put on that sponsorship form. Oh, sorry, and a tick box for the donors to say, yes, treat this amount as gift aid. That's, if you like, that's some signing the declaration, that's some confirming you can do it. And the dates they were given over to the charity. So again, that gives an audit trail from HMRC, when he went to the charity, etc., etc. Now, this is one of the forms, or this is a form that HMRC recommend. There's a link, you can download this from the HMRC. You'll see at the top, it says, please sponsor me. That'd be the name of the person that's doing it, the event, the name of the church, will then go next. You can then see you've got the declaration wording at the top, and then it asks for the sponsor's name, their home address and postcode, the donation amount, date paid, etc., etc. Now, essentially, the HMRC say, yeah, if you want to use this form, that's absolutely fine. You can do that. If you want to design your own form, you can do that as well. But what they ask is that you send it to them, first of all, before you use it, to verify it, to say, yep, that's acceptable. You can use that form. And it is really worthwhile doing that and making sure it's verified. Because if there are any queries, if you've got an email back from the HMRC saying, yeah, this is fine, this is absolutely correct. If there's any query later on, you can say, this is a form, you checked it, and they won't question this, essentially. We have heard in the past where people haven't had the sponsorship form correct, and HMRC have queried it in there. So either use that one or use your own. You can put logos on it, you can put the church logo on it, you can put your church address in, that's perfectly fine, but just run it past the HMRC first of all. In that case, you can then claim gift aid on those donations where the donor said, tick the box to do it. Aggregated donations. Now, I've included this in just really because it's a time saver. So aggregated donations, and it is one of the things I've seen several times that people don't claim gift aid on all their envelopes. So if you have a baptism, for example, at a church, and you have all the one-off envelopes and people put a donation in and fill in the gift aid declaration in the back. Some churches I've spoken to in the past, if the amount was below a certain amount, and off the top of my head, I think it was £5, the gift aid secretary at the time said, oh, I wouldn't enter those in, I wouldn't deal with that. It's not worth it for the amount of gift aid that you get back. And that's where aggregated donations really come into their own. What they do is, if in your gift aid envelopes, your one-off gift aid envelopes, where they've signed declaration, if you've got £20 or less in each envelope, instead of having to record each envelope, each donor, each donation amount, you can just total them together. So if you have a service and you have 30 envelopes given at that service, totaling £90, for example, instead of having to enter 30 donors, 30 donations, 30 declarations to be able to claim, you can just say, this aggregated donation total is £90, then put a reference on, so you keep all the envelopes together. Actually, I'll put that down. Yeah. Keep all the envelopes together, and it's just one donation amount against an aggregated donor record. And that's it. Then it doesn't matter if there's 50p in the envelope, if there's £19 in the envelope, you're just aggregating the total together and submitting it as one aggregated donation. So again, you're maximising the amount of gift aid on all the one-off donations, however large or small they are. The only difference with aggregated donation, well, actually, it's not a difference because you need to anyway, but all those envelopes, you need to keep those for the 6 years plus the current year, because they are effectively the declaration for those donations. So those 30 envelopes, I'd band them together, put a reference number in to say it was this service, this day, this time, that links to your donor records, put the total on, and that just matches everything. So again, you've got a clear audit trail between those aggregated donations and the claim. The only limits with aggregated donations is that each entry can't total more than £1,000. So you'd have to have, 50 envelopes, each of £20 before you got to that limit. If you did have that, if you say you had £1,300, you'd have one aggregated amount of £1,000, a second aggregated amount of £300. It's still a lot quicker to do. And you must keep a audit trail. So that's kind of why I put that in, because it's quite often missed, and it's another way of increasing the amount of donations you claim. Another one is donations from joint bank accounts. If a church or charity receives a donation from a joint bank account or joint credit card, but only one person on that account has signed a declaration, so husband and wife, for example. So if my wife made a donation from our joint bank accounts, she signed a gift aid declaration and I haven't, then what the HMRC, they've been fairly relaxed as far as HMRC go with this, is that they say it can be assumed that the donation is made from the person who's made the donation, even if it's authorised by the other person. So if it's a dual signed cheque, if my wife gave the cheque, we both signed it, it's got my name on it, I've signed it, that's still fine to assume it's come from the person that signed the declaration. So even if it's a joint bank account, joint credit card, it doesn't make any difference. You can still claim it's gift aid. The only difference is if you know, if you hold evidence to the contrary. So if you know it came from me and I hadn't signed a gift aid declaration, then fair enough, you can't claim gift aid on, because you know it's come from a non-person that's not holding a declaration. Again, just to cover that off, the HMRC say if there is any doubt, then you should check with the donor to see, has it come from the person that signed the declaration or not? But otherwise, you can assume it's come from the one that has. Church collections for other charities. Now, this can come up quite a lot when it's particularly with funerals, where the family might say, the collection, the end of it, either this goes to cancer research or it's going to some other charity. Can you claim gift aid on those? And it all depends on certain circumstances. It's unfortunately not as easy as yes or no. So my cat is just about to jump on the laptop. Okay, I've just persuaded her not to. So it all depends on a certain series of circumstances. So first of all, has the church exercised discretion in collecting the donations for that charity? What that means is it the church that decided the collection at the end of this funeral is going to cancer research? Or is it the family that decided it's going to cancer research? If it's family that's decided, then no, the church hasn't exercised any discretion, the family have decided. So in that case, if the answer is no, are the donations merely given to the church simply to pass on to the charity? So yes, you're collecting the donations at the end of the funeral service, but you know that you're going to pass all that over to the cancer research. Essentially, you're going to pay the cash into the bank and either do faster payments or send a check off to them. So it's simply going straight onto the charity. If that's the case, then the church has got no entitlement to those donations. They don't form part of your income. You haven't got any control over those donations. You're merely acting as a conduit for those donations. They're simply passing through your accounts, going from cash that you might bank to then send the same amount out to the cancer research. And in that case, you can't claim gift aid. The church can't claim gift aid on those because it's not your income. It would be cancer research that would have to claim the gift aid on it because that's where it was intended to go. And that's where the final intention, they have control of that income. And I'll just give an example about a funeral, which I've just talked about. So what about those occasions where you can claim, or are there occasions when you can claim it? And this is where it comes down to, it can come down to making sure things are done properly, distinctly, so you know which side of the line, if you like, you're on. So, however, church may decide to give money to charities, a food bank, for example. So you might have a harvest collection and you decide that we're going to, all the money that's raised from harvest collection is going to go to a local food bank. And we're going to set up a restricted fund to make sure that all the money collected goes into that restricted fund and that goes off to the local food bank. The fund is a restricted fund of the church because people are going to donate at harvest. They know it's going to the food bank, so it's a restricted fund. The church has decided which charity the funds are going to go to beforehand. So they've all decided before the collection's been done, before the service has been done, the church has all decided saying this money is going to go to the local food bank and we've set a restricted fund up for it. Because it's happening as a church event, a church service, the donations will now form part of the church's income. It's going into a restricted fund. It's part of the church's income. And therefore, the church is then able to claim gift aid on those donations. So the church has got a level of discretion over those donations. The church have decided that it's going to go to a local food bank. They've told the people of service this is what's going to happen with those donations. So the money goes in, they can claim gift aid on it. And I suspect I say yes. It's important to note that you are legally obliged. So it's not asking, you're legally obliged to pass over not only the donation, but the gift aid that's collected on those donations to the charity. Because looking at it from the other side, if you like, the donor would have expected that their donation, when they gave the donation, if they got gift aid, both the gift aid and the donation will go to the food bank. So you're legally obliged to pass it on. And I just put in an example there, which is exactly what I was saying a moment ago about the local food bank in there. The one thing which what you don't need for this is a separate declaration. So if the donor that's giving money to the food bank, if you already hold a declaration for that person in the church, you don't need a separate declaration to cover this donation for the food bank. It can still all be covered by the one declaration. Okay, so can gift aid be claimed on voluntary workers' expenses? So in their day-to-day work as a volunteer, volunteers may incur expenses such as travel to and from the church when they carry out their work. As long as the expenses are reasonable and proper, they're not travelling first class to go somewhere or whatever it may be, hiring a chauffeur to take them to work. As long as it's reasonable, the volunteer can be reimbursed for their expenses incurred. Okay. Now going back, before I get to that, one of the requirements of the gift aid scheme is that a donation has to take the form of a payment of a sum of money. And if you look in what's called the Chapter 3 guidance, it will say which is kind of why I've highlighted it there, take the form of a payment of some money. It can't be a paper exercise. So whether it's credit card, debit card, whether it's standing order, open banking transfer, money's changing hands. In a word, cash has to change hands. It can't just be a paper exercise. Money has to move from one to the other. Therefore, the church or charity must physically pay the expenses to the donor. Whether it's a bank transfer, whether it's a check, whether it's cash, it doesn't matter. They have to give that money, so it belongs to the volunteer. The volunteer can then decide to keep the money, or has a free will to decide to donate some or all of the money back to the church. It's a volunteer's free choice. If I go back to one of the first slides in the presentation where it said the gift aid scheme, it's the donation of a donor's own money and it's their free will choice. It's a free will donation. And that's why money has to change hands, because a donor has to be given the decision or enabled the decision to say, would you like to donate it back? And they can decide. And if it's a paper exercise, essentially they haven't got the decision, it's just done. And there's no audit trail of that. Now, when the volunteer donates the money back, it then becomes a free will donation. And the normal rules apply, that you can then treat it as a donation. As long as you've got a declaration, sufficient tax has been paid, the money can be claimed on it. So it is just a matter of making sure you get the expenses claimed, paying it, and then entrusting the volunteer that if they want to donate it back, they will do, and then gift aid can be claimed on it. And donations to support missionaries and other full-time workers. This is, again, it can be quite a fine line at times. You'll see what I mean. So gift aid only applies to unfettered gifts to church or charity for its charitable purposes. And the church or charity has to be able to show that the money and gift aid received was used for its charitable purposes. You can't just be collecting any money for any purpose and claiming gift aid on it. You have to be able to show that it was in furtherance of your charitable objectives. I'm just going to move that over to that side. There we go. So donations from missionary or other full-time workers from a family member or relative will not be eligible for gift aid if the donation is merely seen as a way of channeling a donation to a relative. So what the HMRC mean by that is, let's say there was a missionary or a family, a child, parents was out doing missionary work, and the parents were going to send money over to support them. If the church said, well, actually, don't do that, give it to us, we'll claim gift aid on it, and then we'll give it to that same person. That's what HMRC is saying you can't do, because all you're doing is you're channeling the money through the church simply to claim the gift aid. The church hasn't got any decision on where that money is going. The family have decided it's going to that person. The whole reason for putting it through the church is just to claim gift aid. And the HMRC don't like that. So that's not allowed for claiming gift aid back. But there'll be circumstances where actually you can claim gift aid on money given to a person doing missionary work. So if you can demonstrate that the church has discretion as to where the funds are going, then it may qualify for gift aid. So the example is, let's say you, as a church, you say, look, it costs £10,000 a year to support a missionary whilst they're out doing the missionary work. And we look to raise that amount of money. Let's say the church was supporting 2 missionaries, so it had a total expenditure of £20,000. If family members donated to that missionary pot, that missionary fund, and the church could decide which missionary it was going to be. So you could have, say, if my daughter was doing missionary work, and I said, here's a donation, and the church could decide, well, actually, your daughter's already got sufficient money to look after herself, but our other missionary hasn't. So we're going to use your donation for the other one, not your daughter. That potentially means that the church are making a decision where the money goes. The family is just putting money into a missionary pot, and then potentially gift aid can be claimed with it. So you see, it can be quite a fine line as to whether you can or can't claim gift aid on it. The dividing line is essentially who decides which missionary the money is being donated to. If the family decide, you can't claim gift aid on it. If the church decide, if they've got free will to decide, potentially you can claim gift aid on it. Concerts, charity events, etc. So to be able to claim gift aid on a donation, it must be free will gift of money. Remember, you're going back to that's at the beginning. Therefore, if you purchase a ticket or if there's a mission charge to attend an event, it's not a donation. You're paying to attend. If you don't pay, you can't attend. It's not a donation. Go back to the tea and coffee. If you have to pay for the tea and coffee, it's not a donation. If it's a free event and you happen to make a donation, then it can be. It's the same with this. If you purchase a ticket, if there's a mission charge, it's not a donation. You can't claim gift aid on it. Similarly, just describing something as a minimum donation or donation to attend an event is not a free will donation. The HMRC don't really pay much to that. The principle is whether you call it donation or minimum donation, if you still got to pay to attend the event, whether it's ticket or mission charge, you can't claim gift aid on it, whatever you call it. So what are the options? You can set a ticket price and request a donation on top. So for example, you could say the ticket price is £10. If you'd like to give extra on top of that, £15, that's fantastic. The £10 is a ticket price. You can't claim gift aid on it. Whatever they give over that, say the additional £5, that's a donation because they don't have to make it. It's their choice. You could potentially claim gift aid on that. So it can't be compulsory. The donor must be made aware it's not compulsory, that they just have to pay the £10. Anything over is their choice. And preferential treatment can't be given to those. So you can't say, if you make a donation, you can sit in the first 5 rows. It's got to be absolutely equal for everyone. The alternatively is you could run the whole event as a donation only. So there's no ticket price, there's no admission charge, you just accept donations. But obviously there'd be increased risk that you might not cover all the costs in there, but potentially you could claim gift aid or GASDS on them. Charity auctions, I think I'm running out of time. We've got about 5 minutes left, Stephen.
Yeah, 5 minutes because there's a 10-minute break before the next workshop.
Yeah. I'll skip over charity auctions, but just I'll very quickly say it. So if you do a charity auction, if the item is commercially available, then potentially you could claim gift aid. So let's say you did an auction of a football shirt. In the shops, the football shirt is available for £40, and through the auction you sell it for £100. Then because it's commercially available, you can compare it. You can say that the £40 is that the purchase of a ticket, you can't claim gift aid on it. The £60 overpayment is a donation, you could potentially claim gift aid on that. There you can see that. If the football shirt, using that as an example, has been changed in any way, so let's say the football team have signed it, they've signed the football shirt, that isn't commercially available. Whatever is being paid at the auction is a purchase price, you can't claim gift aid on it. And for anything which isn't commercially available, it's a service that you can't buy. Again, the purchase price is how much is paid at the auction, you can't claim gift aid on it. And just the benefit rule, again, I'm going to skip over that. Claiming gift aid on waived loans repayments. So what I was saying earlier about if somebody makes you a loan and they say, okay, you don't need to pay anything else off, you don't need to repay anything, can you treat what's left, the amount that you don't have to repay, as a donation? Well, you can't just by them saying you don't have to pay back. You have to get what's called a waiver. So there needs to be a formal waiver held by the charity. And essentially, if it's a small donation amount, that can just be an email saying, confirming with the donor that they sign away any rights for that to be repaid. So they can't come back to you at a later point to say, actually, you do need to repay it in there. So the date of the donation at that point will be the date of the waiver. This really came up when COVID hit and people were paid, donors are paid for tickets to events. And the question then was, do the church repay them? And some donors said, just keep it as a donation. I don't want it back. It's a small amount, just keep and treat as a donation. And that's really where this came into. So what the HMRC have said is, if it's a small nominal amount, just do maybe it's an email or something saying, okay, we confirm that you'd like to treat this as a donation. You're signing away any rights for it to be repaid, but you've got the option to have it repaid if you want to. You know you can have it back. You're actually deciding to give it as a donation. If it's a large amount, you need a statement making it expressly clear that the lender is giving up all legal rights to any future payments. Confirmation that they waived is to be treated as a donation for gift aid, and details of exactly what's been waived. So yes, it can be done. You just, if it's a large amount, you need to get a proper statement in place. If it's a small amount, an email just confirming details will normally be enough. And just finally, that's part of our gift aid training course. So we do a gift aid and GASDS training course. It's free. They are about an hour length. Those are the details. We've got one for treasury training. So what I've kind of pulled together then is a bit of what is gift aid for part of week 1 and part of week 2. If you want to book onto the full details, just go to our website, click on training tab, and you can register for them. And I say all those courses are free of charge. They're recorded. If you can't watch it live, you'll get a replay link and you can catch it later on. And I think that takes me up to 25 past, Stephen.
Thanks, Steve.